Hello and welcome to one and all. So we'll continue with the land reforms in India. So in the previous class, I've explained to you about the meaning of land reforms. What is the main reason the government had to introduce the land reforms in the country? The main purpose is most of the poor farmers, they were exploited by the uh, zamindari system and other type of intermediaries introduced by the British government. So the man-land relationship was defective at the time of independence. So the government wanted to improve the conditions of the small and marginal farmers and other landless households in the country by redistributing the land to the poor farmers. So under that objective, based on that objective, the government introduced certain land reform measures. So out of that, the first one was abolishing all the intermediaries that were introduced by the Britishers, all the zamindari system, rightwari system, mahalwari system. So the government had removed all those intermediaries between 1951 to 1960. And the second measure the government had undertaken is to improve the conditions of the tenants by introducing the tenancy reforms by fixing the rent, what should be the maximum rent the tenant has to pay. Second, providing the security to the tenants, that is, uh, as long as the tenants are paying the rent to the owner continuously, regularly, he should not be evicted from that piece of land. And finally, the ultimate solution is giving the ownership rights to the tenants. So these were all the tenancy reforms. So the next measure introduced by the government was imposing ceilings on land holdings. So ceilings on land holdings, uh, under this, the government has fixed what should be the maximum area of land that could be owned by a family. So if any excess was there in the possession of a family, that would be taken over by the government and redistributed to the small and marginal farmers. But this program was introduced by the government, I mean, in around 1960s. But the problem is the land reforms was a state subject. So because of this reason, each and every state government, they were imposing their own rules. There were no uniformity in that, mainly in the imposition of ceilings of land holdings. Okay, because of the differences in each and every state, there are all the chief ministers of all the states, they had a conference in 1972. So based on that conference, they came to some conclusion. Okay, so on what basis the ceiling should be imposed by each and every state. So some of the features of that ceilings on land holdings in the country was some guideline. Some guideline was had they had come to some consensus on what basis they should impose the ceilings. So the first one was ceiling limit is to be, I mean, they should 18 acres of wetland. That means if the land is fertile or if it has the irrigation facilities, then in that case, the maximum area the family can hold is only up to 18 acres. But if it is a dry land and without any irrigation facilities, then the maximum limit is extended to dry land and without any irrigation facilities. So a family can own a maximum of 18 acres if it happens to be a fertile land with irrigation facilities, or if it is not fertile and without any irrigation facilities, they can own a maximum of 54 acres. Then the second uh, measure is how they can, I mean, we are saying it's family. So the family is consisting of the taken into 5 members. So if you're saying a family can own 18 acres of wetland or 54 acres of dry land without any irrigation facilities, then what is that family? How do you identify? I mean, what is the limit of that family? So the family should be consisting of 5 members. But if there are extra members in the family, the government is allowing to have the extra land But then whatever might be the number of members in the family, that should not exceed, should not for, I mean, more members, extra land is provided, but should not exceed twice the ceiling limit. That means, for suppose if it is 18 acres, maximum the family can have is, depending upon the number of members in the family, maximum they can have is only up to 36 acres. Irrespective of more members are there in the family, it should not exceed more than the 36 acres. So twice the ceiling limit. Okay. So that is the, basically the family is taken, a unit of 5 members is considered as a family. Okay. Then the third measure is exemptions from the ceiling are to be reduced. So there are certain kind of land, they are exempted from the ceiling limit. Exempted from the ceiling limit means they can own more than 54 acres, they can own more than 16 18 acres. So then some area of land which is held by the cooperative farming society, so they are not falling under the purview of ceiling limit. Or the land that are held by the agricultural universities, so those kind of lands, they are all exempted from the ceiling limit. So like that, so many lands are being exempted from the ceiling limit. Those kind, the number of exemptions, they have to be reduced. Okay, that is the next agreement. Then the fourth one is the related acts to be related acts to be kept out of the purview of the civil courts, meaning it has to be decided by the state government. Whatever, if there is any uh, dispute, those disputes have to be, I mean, tackled, I mean, undertaken only by the state government. It should not go to the court, because the reason, once it goes to the court, it will take a long time to settle the dispute. So that's why it has to be kept away from the civil court. Okay. Then the next one is the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. They are to be given the priority. So while the government is distributing the uh, extra land after imposing the ceiling, the government is distribute priority in distribution. When the government is distributing the land, the first priority should be given to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So priority in distribution of excess land. And the next one, lands under plantation crops. Plantation crops are like coffee, tea, sugarcane. They all come under the rubber. They all come under the plantation cost. So they are all exempted from ceiling. So this is another exemptions. So because all these plantation crops, they require a huge area. You cannot confine the land area to so and so acres. So they basically, their nature of cultivation is that they require a huge amount of area. So you cannot impose a ceiling on plantation crops. So whatever the crops that are plantation lands under the plantation crops, they have to be exempted from the ceiling limits. So these were all the uh, agreement made by all the chief ministers during 1972 in that conference. Okay. But then the problem is, there was a lot of lapses are there. First, the government had to impose the ceiling. The second thing is, after imposing the ceiling, the government has to identify what is the total amount of excess area of surplus land available. So that surplus land available, whatever the surplus land available, those lands have to be taken over by the government. And then whatever the land that is acquired by the government, that those lands have to be redistributed to the poorer section, the small marginal and landless farmers in the country. So there were a lot of lapses. First, there was a gap between whatever the land the government has declared as surplus, how much the land the government has taken over, and how much out of the taken over land, how much land the government has already, actually distributed. See, it was at the end of the, based on the data, you can find that at the end of eighth plan. So eighth plan is between 1992 97. This was the time the economic reforms were also introduced in our country, if you remember. So at the end of the eighth plan, so it was found out 74.9 lakh acres were declared as surplus. After imposing the ceiling, this much land were supposed to be, declared as surplus. So the government should have distributed the entire 74.9 lakh acres, isn't it? But then finally, the government could distribute only 52.13 lakh acres were distributed. So there is a gap, the how much the declared land as surplus and how much actually the government is taking over and how much the actual land the government is distributing. This is one of the problems with the ceilings on land holdings. So around distributed to approximately around 5.5 million beneficiaries. Okay, and the survey, the data shows there is no improvement in the ninth plan. Also, it remains status quo, it remains the same. So there is no improvement in the distribution of land from the government side. But anyway, this is the ceilings on land holdings. Okay, and then the next measure, land reform measure introduced by the government was consolidation of land holdings. So this measure is introduced to rectify the defect of fragmentation of land ones. To rectify, this measure is first introduced to rectify the defect of fragmentation of land holdings. So what is this meaning of land holdings? So under consolidation of land holdings, all the scattered land of the farmer will be taken over by the government, and the farmer will be given in one area. The farmer will be given in one area as a compact block equivalent to the area surrendered by him or her. That means for pooling all the scattered land holdings of the farmers in the entire village, and whatever the land that is, the farmers, they have to surrender the land. So like that, all the farmers, they will surrender the scattered lands to the government. The government will pool all the land of the farmers, and then according to the area which they have surrendered, they will be, instead of all the uh, scattered pieces, they will be given in one particular area. See, for example, the what is the fragmentation of land holding? The other day I mentioned one piece of land is the northern side of the village, another one is in the western side, another one is the southern side, and another one is the eastern side. So let us assume this is 1 acre, 1 hectare, this is 1 hectare, this is 1 hectare. So totally the farmer is having 4 hectares scattered in all around the village. So the farmer will be given in one place equivalent to 4 hectares instead of maybe only in northern side or only in the southern side. So instead of all the scattered land spread over all over the village, the farmer will be given only in one particular area. So that is the consolidation. Consolidation, pooling all the scattered pieces of land. So like that, all the farmers, they have to surrender their pieces of land to the government, equivalent to whatever they have surrendered, the government will give in one particular place. So instead of having one piece in different corners of the village, if the farmer gets in one particular place, the bigger area, the area will also become bigger, and he can introduce all the modern methods of cultivation. So that was the idea behind the consolidation of land holdings. But also, this one also was not implemented properly, because only in the state of Punjab and Maharashtra, this consolidation was completed. Punjab, Haryana, and Maharashtra. In other states, it was not very successful, because the farmers were hesitant to surrender the land to the government, because according to them, maybe the piece of land what they were having in the southern side, maybe what they were having in the eastern side of the village, they are more fertile. Once they surrender the land to the government, if the government redistributes the land in one particular area, that land might not be as fertile as what they were having. So with a lot of hesitancy on the part of the uh, farmers. Okay, so that's why it was also successful only in some of the states. Majority of the states, it was not successful. But anyway, that was the idea of consolidation of land holdings. Then finally, the last measure introduced by the government was cooperative farming. So the cooperative farming, it is all the farmers, supposed to be all the farmers join, sorry, form a cooperative society voluntarily. That is the main thing. It's run on a democratic principle, voluntarily, and surrender or contribute whatever the assets they are having. Whatever the assets. Assets in the sense that whatever the area of land they are having, seeds, fertilizers, whatever the mechanization, etc. Whatever the assets they are having, they surrender to the society, and all of them, they join together and cultivate the land in as a one big area. Okay, so if all the farmers join together, surrendering all their assets, including their land, and jointly cultivate, so the area will become bigger, isn't it? Because all the farmers have donated, contributed to their piece of land. So now what, the area will become bigger, and they will get the advantages of large scale farming. So they will get all the advantages of large scale farming. So instead of each and every individual farmer cultivating with their limited assets, with their limited capacities in the tiny pieces of land, if all of them jointly cultivate together in one big area, so the yield will become better. And whatever the yield, it is shared, the distributed according to the area surrendered by the farmers. And then whatever, and it is not that they have to work on the field also. So according to the area surrendered, they are getting the profits. And according to the work done by the farmers, they will be paid the wages. So this was the idea behind the cooperative farming. But unfortunately, this one also not very successful, because the problem was most of the farmers who joined in this cooperative society happened to be big farmers. So there are two reasons why they joined the cooperative society. Because if you the big the land under cooperative society was exempted from ceiling limit. So if the land is held under the cooperative society, the government cannot impose the ceiling. So if the big farmers automatically they want to escape from the ceiling limit imposed by the government. So because of that reason, most of the big farmers they joined the uh, cooperative society. So they were all exempted from ceiling limit. And on the top of it, since they are the big farmers, they have the they were having the dominant voice over the small and marginal farmers. And most of the farmers, small and marginal farmers, they don't know their rights, isn't it? They are illiterate and ignorant. Could not voice their opinion. What should be the how much should they should receive in the form of profit according to the land which they have surrendered? What should be the wages they should receive according to the work they are doing? And you can understand that only the small and marginal farmers and the landless laborers, they were the ones who are actually cultivating. The big farmers are there in that management level. Okay, so this thing, the big farmers, they were exploiting the small and marginal farmers, and there is no any proper standard rules how to distribute the profit, how to distribute the wages, how to distribute extra income for extra work. So all those norms, rules and regulations were not properly fixed. And on the top of it, the big farmers were they were dominating the small farmers, and they joined the cooperative society mainly to mainly to escape from the ceiling limit imposed by the government. So because of this reason, this cooperative farming society also, cultivation, it's also become a failure. But anyway, these were all some of the land reform measures introduced by the government. Okay, and and based on all these features, you can understand that the land reform measure introduced by the government was not very successful. So there are a lot of criticisms against the land reform measure. So let us check out what are all the criticism leveled against the land reform measure. The critical appraisal of land reforms introduced in our country. So the first one was loopholes in the act. The way in which the laws were framed, that I mean, there were so many people, the big farmers were easily they were able to escape. So basically just now I mentioned, most of the big farmers, they are joining the cooperative society because they wanted to escape the land ceiling. So like that, there are so many loopholes in the act. So basically what is happening, the big landlords, because they have a lot of powers, isn't it? They have a lot of connection. So they have big landlords with their political and financial powers, were retaining their land, retaining or escaping the ceiling limits. So that is the first. They could own more acres of land by escaping the act. That is a one loophole in the land reform measure. The second criticism is lack of political will. So lack of political will, because the government is also not very strict, because most of the time the government, they needed the support of the big landlords, because the government, they needed the support of big landlords. Whatever the uh, the rules were not implemented very strictly by the government, because they didn't want to irritate the big landlords. So from the government also, the political will, the implementation of the land reforms is not very strict from the part of the government. Then the third one is passive nature of beneficiaries. So who are all the beneficiaries here? Basically all the poor, small marginal farmers and the landless laborers, isn't it? And we know that most of these poor and marginal farmers, they are all very illiterate. They are illiterate, ignorant, and they are not aware of what should be their benefits, isn't it? So because of that illiteracy, because of that ignorance, they could not voice any of their opinions. Okay, so what is their right, they are not able to demand it, because they are not aware of anything. They are not even aware of their rights. So they see, if you are voicing your opinion, you will get. If you are demanding what is your right, you will get whatever you require. But if you are not demanding anything because of your ignorance, because of your illiteracy, what will you get? So that is the passive nature of the beneficiaries, because of their illiteracy. Most of the small farmers, they are of that nature. And bureaucracy. this bureaucracy. So Indian, this is passed on from the British rule. So this, because of the bureaucratic nature of the government, this land reform, which is again because of the British rule, which could not be implemented properly in the country. Nobody is, this bureaucratic nature, the responsibility keeps on passing from one department to another department. Nobody is taking the entire responsibility of implementing the land reforms properly. Okay, so because of that, nobody is making any proper interest, exhibiting any keen interest to implement the land reforms in the country. And then the next one is the legal hurdles. So once if there is any dispute, what is happening, it is, even though it is exempted from courts as per agreement of the chief ministers, still most of the, if there is any dispute, the farmers are taking into the courts. Again, that is happening because of the, we know there are so many loopholes in this, and nothing is strict here. Because of the so many loopholes in the law, most of the disputes, they have been taken into the courts, and once it goes to the courts, it's taking a very, very long time to settle. So legally it is becoming, taking a very long time to settle the issue. So that's the legal hurdle. And non availability of records, land records. So this we are talking in 1950s or 1960s or 70s, where the digital thing was not there in the country, remember. So most of the, in the remote corners of the villages and all, who is maintaining the land records, like who are all the landowners, how many small and marginal farmers are there, what is the ceiling limit, how many members of the family are there, how much percentage is the dry land, how much percentage is the wetland, what is the ceiling limit, how much percentage of the landlords are having the excess land. So there are so many records has to be maintained with the in the registrar office. So that kind of land records are not available in all the villages of the country. And finally, there is a land as a state subject. Land reform is a not a central government, so it happens to be a state subject. So because of the state subject, there is no uniformity among the states. See, if it is implemented by the central government, all over the state, it will be implemented uniformly. But since it's become a state subject, there is no uniformity among the states. Okay, and finally, delay in the follow-up action. So delay in follow-up action, I mentioned to you there are a lot of loopholes there, isn't it? How much the, especially in the ceilings on land holdings, how much land is declared as surplus, how much the government is taking over, and how much the government is distributing. So if there is a gap, there should be a follow-up action, isn't it? So if the so and so acres of land is not being distributed to the farmers, so somebody has to follow up that, so that the gap should be filled up. And also, after distributing the land to the poor and marginal farmers, so what is the follow-up action? Again, whether they are cultivating is not. So only with the piece of land they cannot do anything. They need other assistance in the form of agricultural inputs, isn't it? So only with a piece of land, what will they do? So continuously they have to be supplied all the agricultural uh, inputs should be provided to the all those small and marginal farmers. Now what is happening here is, most of the people, so we checked out, most of the beneficiaries are SCs and STs, and most of these people belonging to the tribal areas. So once the ceiling was imposed and the government was enthusiastic enough to distribute the land, all those lands were distributed to those people. But over a period of time, with that piece of land, they could not do anything, since there was no follow-up action and no assistance is being provided continuously by the government. So what will they do for their survival? So what they were doing again they are selling whatever the land which they got from the government. Again they are selling the land to the big landlords, and in the same piece of land, again they are working as tenants. So it is might not be no, it is in the form of oral tenancy. Nothing is written because they could not cultivate anything. So again, in that same piece of land, they are selling the land, whatever they got from the government, and in that same piece of land, they are working as a tenant. And again, the same problem is happening again because there is no follow-up action. Okay, so these were all the what you say, the criticisms of land reforms. And on the whole, if you see, it is not a very successful program. Only in very few states, especially in the state of Punjab and Maharashtra and Haryana, only in those states you can say to a reasonable extent the land reform measures have been seriously implemented. In all the other states, it was not a very successful one. And on the top of it, now every state government, every government is concentrating only on that liberalization and privatization. And this topic of land reform, this land reform measure itself on the whole is being sidelined by most of the state governments. Okay, so that was the conclusion. Anyway, this is anyway some measure have been introduced in the form of land reforms by the government. Okay, so hope you have understood in detail what are all the land reform measures in the country. So if you like this video, please, if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. So until my next class, next video, take care. Bye bye.